The air in the cozy cafe where we'd spent so many Saturday mornings felt different today, thick and unfamiliar. I stood outside, my hand on the cool door handle, the weight of my freshly altered wedding dress bag balanced over my arm. I was about to step inside, to show Mark the final piece of our puzzle, when I heard his voice, clear and confident, cutting through the gentle hum of conversation inside. Just doesn't have the same vision, you know? Sarah means well, but her ideas are a bit safe, quaint. My breath hitched. Sarah, that was me. He was talking about me, about our wedding. I froze, my feet rooted to the pavement. A friend's voice, Mike's, chimed in, hesitant. But Mark, the Roman holiday theme. Sarah's been planning it for a year. The Colosseum replica. The vintage Vespa for your exit. She even learned a few phrases in Italian for her vows. It's everything to her. Didn't she give up that film school opportunity in Italy for you? That was a big deal. A soft, feminine laugh I didn't recognize tinkled in the background. Mark's voice softened, taking on that tone he used when he was being deliberately, charmingly reasonable. That was years ago. Ancient history. Look, Chloe just got back from Paris. She was saying how a midnight in Paris theme would be so much more sophisticated, more memorable. Sarah loves me. She wants what's best for my career, for our future together. She'll understand. She's practical. She'll handle the changes. She's amazing at making everything work. It's just a theme, just a theme. The words landed like physical blows. My Roman holiday. The dream I'd clung to through years of supporting his startup, of playing the perfect, understanding partner. The dream I'd built to replace the one I'd shredded, the acceptance letter to the prestigious Rome Film Academy. I'd torn it up because he'd said he needed me. His voice cracking with a vulnerability that melted my resolve. I'd chosen us. And now, my reward was to have the last remnant of that dream casually swapped out on the whim of his new, sophisticated assistant, Chloe, because Sarah was practical, because Sarah would handle it. The heat of betrayal washed over me, so intense it felt cold. I saw it all with a terrifying, crystalline clarity. My love, my sacrifices, my quiet compromises, they weren't treasures to him. They were conveniences, tools he used to smooth his path, expectations he could rely on to never truly push back. I didn't push the door open. I didn't confront him. There was no screaming, no tears. Not there, not then. A strange, heavy calm settled over me. I simply turned around, the bag with my simple, elegant wedding dress, the one he'd said wasn't as dazzling as the one Chloe had pointed out in a magazine, swinging gently at my side. I walked away from the cafe, from the man inside, from the woman I had been inside at home. The silence was deafening. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, the woman who had organized his life, soothed his ego, and buried her own light so his could shine brighter. That woman was a fool. The pain was there, a deep, aching hollow in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a rising, steady fury. He was so sure I would handle it, so certain of my docile love. Fine, I would handle it. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Mark. I called my closest friends, my family. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor I felt in my soul. The wedding is off. I'm sorry for the late notice, please. Consider it a free weekend. Any expenses, I'll cover them. Do not contact Mark's family. Do not tell them you know. Their questions were waves against a cliff face I had become. I absorbed them but did not yield then. I sat down at my computer, with a cold efficiency that surprised me. I designed a new digital invitation. It was chic, black and white, echoing the Parisian theme Mark and Chloe found so sophisticated. I listed the time, the date, and the location of the Parisian Nights-themed restaurant Chloe adored. I sent it to every guest on Mark's extensive list. From his business partners to his distant cousins, it appeared to come from him. Let him explain. Let him stand there. Finally, I went to my closet. I took the wedding dress out of its bag. I looked at it for a long time. It was my dream. And it was beautiful. But it was a dream for a woman who no longer existed. I carefully hung it back up. I would not wear it. I would not cry over it. I pulled out a practical suitcase and filled it with comfortable clothes, my passport, my camera. I went back to my computer and I booked a one-way ticket to Rome. The flight left before dawn. As the plane lifted off, the city lights shrinking beneath me. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound and utter exhaustion, but beneath that, like a seed cracking open in deep, dark earth, there was something else, a flicker, the beginning of something for me, just for me. The phone in my hotel room near the Spanish Steps rang, shrill and insistent, outside my window. The ancient city was bathed in golden morning light. I knew who it was. I let it ring. On the 10th ring, I picked up. Sarah, where the hell are you? Everyone is here. The car was supposed to pick you up hours ago. Mark's voice was a mix of panic and boiling anger. In the background, I could hear the confused murmur of a crowd, the faint strain of accordion music, his Parisian theme, no doubt. I took a slow breath, watching the light play on the weathered stone of the buildings across the street. I'm in Rome, Mark. The silence on the other end was absolute for a count of 3, then, explosion. You're WHAT. Have you lost your mind? It's our wedding day. It's your wedding day. I corrected him, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion he clearly expected. The theme is midnight in Paris. You're the groom. As for the bride, I believe Chloe, who finds Paris so romantic, will be more than willing to step in. She's there, isn't she? In something appropriately dazzling? I didn't wait for his sputtering response. I ended the call. Then, methodically, I blocked his number, his parents' numbers, every social media account I could think of. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I spent the day walking. I didn't have a plan. I just moved, putting one foot in front of the other on the cobblestones. I found myself at the Trevi Fountain, watching tourists toss coins, their faces alight with hope. My own hope felt like a shriveled thing. I sat on the steps of the Piazza di Spagna with a gelato, trying to mimic the joy Audrey Hepburn had once projected here. The sweetness felt like ash on my tongue. The ghost of my younger self haunted every corner. The girl who had called Mark from this very spot, breathless with excitement about her future. A future she thought would include him as her leading man. His voice on that call came back to me, the calculated vulnerability. I need you. And I had gone. I had built my life around that need. I had been his support system, his strategist, his nurse, his 24/7 perfect girlfriend. As his friends had joked, he had promised me the world in return, and the moment he got a taste of it, he brought in a woman who reflected the glamour he thought he deserved, dismissing the steady, practical love that had built his foundation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my best friend, Linda, a string of crying, laughing emojis followed by a video link. Girl, you are my hero. The chaos is legendary. I clicked the link. It was a shaky cell phone video from inside the Parisian Nights restaurant. The Eiffel Tower replicas looked cheap and sad under the harsh lights of day. The place was packed with confused, irritated guests. In the center of the storm stood Mark, his face a thundercloud of purple rage, his parents flanking him, their expressions a mixture of horror and fury. They were being jostled, questions shouted at them. And there, hovering at the edge of the frame, was Chloe. She was indeed wearing a long, pale pink dress that veered dangerously close to bridal. She looked less sophisticated now and more like a startled, out-of-place child, wanting to comfort Mark but afraid to get too close to the tempest. Linda's texts kept coming. He looks like a constipated tomato. His mom just shoved a reporter. Chloe is trying to cry, but I think her Botox won't let her. This is better than any soap opera. A sound escaped me. It was rough, unfamiliar. It took me a moment to realize it was a laugh. It felt strange in my throat. I expected to feel a sharp stab of pain, of humiliation. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a distant, detached satisfaction. He had made his bed. Let him lie in it, in front of everyone he ever wanted to impress. I switched off my phone. The detachment was a shield, and I clung to it. I knew the pain was there, waiting, a deep, cold lake I was skating over. I couldn't fall in, not yet. I walked until my feet ached, trying to outpace the thoughts in my head. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ancient ruins, I found a quiet bench overlooking the Forum. The scale of time, of empires that had risen and fallen, made my personal drama feel both insignificant and strangely part of a larger human story of loss and resilience. Scusa, Signora. I looked up. A man was standing nearby, holding a camera. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners and a weathered, honest face. He wasn't handsome in a polished way like Mark, but there was a warmth and a stability to him. I am sorry to disturb, he said in accented but clear English. I am a photographer. I was taking pictures of the light, and I took one of you. I thought it was a good picture. You looked peaceful. He held out a printed photograph. I took it, surprised. In the picture, I was silhouetted against the setting sun, looking out over the ruins. My face was in profile, and though I knew I had been feeling utterly shattered, the image captured something else, a quiet contemplation, a strength I didn't feel I possessed. The light haloed my hair, and for the first time in years, I didn't look like Mark's Fianchi, or his assistant, or the practical organizer. I looked like myself. Just Sarah. Thank you, I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. It's beautiful, it is the subject, he said with a gentle smile. I am Gabriel, Sarah, I said, and for the first time since I'd arrived, saying my own name didn't feel like admitting to a failure. Welcome to Rome, Sarah, he said. He didn't ask what brought me here alone, he didn't offer pity. He just nodded and moved on, leaving me with the photograph and a strange, fragile sense of possibility. The next week was a blur of strange, quiet routines. I would wake up early, walk without a destination, eat simple food, and sit in piazzas watching people live their lives. The sharp, stabbing pain of betrayal began to dull into a constant, heavy ache. The shield of detachment started to crack, and the cold water of reality seeped in. I had blown up my life. I was alone in a foreign country. The future was a terrifying blank page. I avoided news from home, but Linda kept me updated in sparing, careful messages. Mark, predictably, had gone on a PR offensive. He'd posted a carefully curated, gloomy selfie with a caption about a lover's quarrel and his undying hope that I would come home to my embrace and to the Paris we were supposed to share. He'd hashtagged it Lovespation and wait in Immerse. His sycophantic friends and paid commentators had piled on, painting me as an impulsive, hysterical bride who couldn't handle a last-minute surprise. Chloe had shared it, adding, praying for you both. Love always wins. Forgiveness. The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to rewrite history, to frame my escape as a trivial tantrum, my profound hurt as a mere misunderstanding he was magnanimously enduring. He was betting on my old patterns, my desire to avoid conflict, to be the good sport, to smooth things over. He thought the pressure of public opinion, wielded by him, would force me back into my box. Linda called, her voice tight with anger. He had the nerve to call me, told me to talk some sense into you. Said you were playing games and that if you came back and apologized to him and his parents, and can you believe this, to Chloe in person, he might consider taking you back. I told him to get lost and get therapy. I felt a surge of gratitude for her. Thank you, Linda. Don't thank me. Just be happy, Sarah. Whatever that looks like now, be happy. It seemed an impossible concept, but being free, that was starting to feel tangible. His attempts to control the narrative, to control me from across an ocean, were having the opposite effect. Each manipulative post, each arrogant assumption, poured cold water on the embers of any lingering affection or doubt. The lake of pain was still there, but I was no longer skating on it. I was learning to swim in it, to move through the cold and come out on the other side. I spent an afternoon in a small internet cafe. I didn't look at social media instead. I found myself searching for film schools in Italy then, almost of its own volition. My finger opened a blank document. I started typing. It was a scene, then another. Fragments of a story about a woman who wakes up one day and realizes the life she's living belongs to someone else. It was messy, raw, and entirely mine. The act of creation was like stretching a muscle I hadn't used in years. It was painful and exhilarating. One evening, as I was having a solitary dinner at a small trattoria, my phone rang with another unknown number. A part of me knew it was him. The anger I'd been carefully managing surged. I answered, putting it on speaker and placing the phone on the table next to my plate of pasta. Sarah? Finally, have you come to your senses? Mark's voice was a whip crack, devoid of its fabricated online patience. It was all impatience and entitlement. My senses are perfectly intact, Mark. Good. Then you'll see what a mess you've made. My company's stock is dipping because of this stupid scandal. I need you to get on a plane now. We'll do a press conference at the airport. You'll say it was a mutual decision for a destination elopement, that you got cold feet about the big crowd, and we're going to have a private ceremony here. You'll apologize for the confusion. We'll smile. And this will all go away. If you do this, I might be able to forgive you. The sheer unvarnished gall of it. He wasn't asking. He was issuing a decree. He thought my value was so diminished that this insulting script was a prize I should beg for. And if I don't? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Then don't bother coming back. He snarled. You think you can do better? You've been used goods for years, Sarah. No one else will want you after this. Who would take you? You're damaged. I'm your only option. The words were meant to wound, to shatter whatever was left of me. And they did hurt. They echoed the deepest, darkest fears I'd been fighting. But hearing them spoken aloud by the man I'd almost married didn't make them true. It made him pathetic. I looked up. The waiter, a young man with sympathetic eyes, had been clearing the next table. he'd heard. He gave me a small, encouraging nod. It was all the confirmation I needed. Mark, I said, my voice clear and steady. There's someone here who might have a different opinion on that. I picked up the phone and held it out toward the waiter. He looked startled for a second. Then understanding dawned. He leaned in close to the speaker. Signore, he said, his voice firm and laced with a beautiful, dismissive Italian contempt. The lady? She is enjoying her dinner. She does not wish to be disturbed. Perhaps you should go bother someone else. Ciao. He made a cutting motion across his throat. I ended the call. We looked at each other for a beat, and then we both laughed. It was a real laugh this time, free and loud. Grazie, I said, wiping a tear from my eye. Thank you. Prego, signora, he said, smiling. Some men, they are like bad wine, sour. You deserve better. It was a small moment, a silly moment, but it was a turning point. I had stood up for myself, not with a grand gesture, but by allowing a stranger to voice the contempt I felt. The world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it had just gotten a little bigger, a little kinder. Back in my hotel room, feeling a strange new energy, I did something I hadn't planned to do. I opened my suitcase. Buried deep beneath my clothes was a flat, rigid portfolio. Inside, protected by plastic sleeves, was the acceptance letter to the Rome Film Academy. The paper was creased, the tear lines visible where I had meticulously, heartbreakingly taped it back together years ago. As if to punish myself with what I'd lost, I laid it on the bed, next to it. I placed my passport, opened to the page with my photo and the Italian entry stamp. I took a picture with my phone. The image was simple, stark, and spoke volumes. I opened my long-dormant social media account. It was flooded with notifications from Mark's posts. I ignored them. I uploaded the single picture. I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I simply wrote 2 lines. Hello, Rome. Hello, Sarah. Then I logged out. I didn't need to see the reaction. The act itself was the point. I was reclaiming my name. I was reclaiming my narrative. I was, finally, beginning. The photograph of my taped-together acceptance letter next to my passport in Rome did exactly what I suppose. On some level, I knew it would. It was a silent bomb. Linda's messages became all caps and exclamation points. Sarah, the internet is on fire. For you. Everyone knows. She sent screenshots. The narrative had not just shifted. It had inverted completely. Comments on Mark's Wait and Immerse post were now flooded with replies like, waiting for her after you made her give up her dream. You're a monster. So Paris was the assistant's idea? Classy, love-is patient but apparently dreams it is spinals. News outlets picked it up. The story was no longer Runaway Bride. It was the dream he told her to shred. People I hadn't heard from in years, old professors, classmates from my brief time in film classes messaged me with support and outrage. The collective cultural understanding of a woman sacrificing for her man is deep, but the collective outrage when that sacrifice is thrown back in her face is deeper. Mark's carefully constructed house of cards collapse. The lovers' quarrel was exposed as a gaslighting campaign. His business suffered more than a dipping stock. Major partners, fearing the toxic PR and questioning the judgment of a man who would treat his partner so callously, publicly severed ties. His phone, once a conduit for sycophancy, now rang with the cold, hard questions of lawyers and investors. I learned all of this through Linda's gleeful, if fragmented, reports. I felt no joy in his downfall. Not really. It was more like watching a dangerous animal finally being caged, a profound relief. The space he had occupied in my mind, the constant anxiety of his judgment, began to shrink, making room for other things. One of those things was the story I kept writing. It poured out of me in fits and starts. Scenes of anger and grief and tentative discovery. I didn't think about making a film. I was simply trying to make sense of my own experience. It was on a day when the words weren't flowing that I decided to visit the Vatican museums, hoping the grandeur of art would distract me. I was standing, slightly dazed, in the midst of the overwhelming Sistine Chapel, craning my neck at Michelangelo's masterpiece, when a familiar voice spoke beside me. It is never less than overwhelming, is it? I turned. It was Gabriel, the photographer. He held his camera loosely around his neck but wasn't using it. He was just looking. Gabriel, hello, Sarah. I thought it was you. He smiled. The light from the window was on your face the same way it was in the forum. Are you well? It was a simple, profound question. I'm getting there, I answered, and it felt true. We fell into step together. Leaving the crowded chapel for the slightly less crowded halls, he didn't ask prying questions. He talked about the art, about the history, about the way the light changed in Rome from hour to hour. He spoke with a passion that was infectious, intelligent but not pretentious. He was a storyteller, but with light and composition instead of words. And you? He asked finally as we found a quiet bench in a courtyard. What is your story, Sarah? Not the one everyone is reading online. The one you are telling yourself. I looked at my hands, then back at his kind, expectant face, and I told him, not the dramatic, bullet point version, but the slow, quiet erosion of self, the dream of film school, the choice to stay, the years of making myself smaller, the wedding theme, the conversation outside the caf, the chilling clarity, the flight. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded slowly, so he said, You are not on holiday, you are in recovery. Tears I hadn't been able to cry for weeks pricked at my eyes. That was it exactly. Yes, and what will you recover? The girl who wanted to go to film school. Or someone new. I don't know, I admitted. Perhaps you should find out, he said gently. I have a friend who teaches at a small studio, not the big academy, but a good place. They offer short courses for people who need to remember why they love a thing. A week later, thanks to Gabriel, I was sitting in a small, sunlit studio smelling of sawdust and paint, surrounded by a handful of other people of all ages, holding a clunky old Bolex camera. It felt alien and familiar all at once. The first time I loaded the film, my hands shook. The instructor, a wiry woman with ink-stained fingers named Sophia, placed her hand over mine. It is just a tool, Sarah. It only does what you tell it. You are the boss, not it, not anyone else. I was the boss. The concept was revolutionary. I started spending my days there. I learned about lenses, about framing, about the magic of cutting and splicing film by hand. I helped other students on their little projects. The raw, messy, collaborative energy was a bomb. I wasn't thinking about Mark. I wasn't thinking about the past. I was thinking about light and shadow, and how to tell a story in 60 seconds. One afternoon, Gabriel stopped by. He watched me struggling to edit a short, silent sequence I'd shot of an old man feeding pigeons in the Piazza Navona. Can I? He asked, pointing to the editing bench. I nodded, his hands, sure and calm, moved with an effortless grace. He showed me a different rhythm, a way to cut that emphasized the man's solitude rather than just his action. The story transformed. You have a good eye, he said. The shot composition is strong. You just need to trust your instinct for the story. He became a regular presence. We would have coffee after class. We talked about films, the ones we loved, the ones that made us think. He was widowed. I learned. His wife had been a painter. He understood loss. He understood the quiet work of building a new life alongside the memory of the old. There was no pressure with him, no expectation, just a steady, growing companionship. I finished my short course. My final project was a 3-minute silent film, a series of vignettes of Rome from dawn to dusk, seen through the eyes of someone seeing it clearly for the first time. It was rough, it was imperfect. When it was projected on the white wall of the studio, I held my breath. When the lights came up, there was silence, then genuine, warm applause. Sophia nodded at me. A real, earned smile on her face. Gabriel was there. In the back, he didn't clap. He just looked at me. His expression one of deep respect that meant more than any applause. After everyone had left, he handed me a small envelope. A friend of mine runs a very small local film festival. In Paris, actually, he paused, letting the irony hang in the air between us. It is for emerging filmmakers, short films, documentaries. I sent him your piece. He would like to include it. I stared at the invitation. It was simple, printed on plain cardstock. But it felt heavier than my wedding invitation ever had. Paris, the city that had been the symbol of my betrayal, now, it was being offered back to me as a site of my potential. I looked at Gabriel, my eyes wide. You sent it? Without telling me. I believed in it, and I believe in you. The question is, Sarah, he said, his voice soft but firm, do you believe in you enough to go? I thought of Mark's Paris, a cheap theme for a shallow fantasy. I thought of the Paris of the filmmakers I admired, Godard, Truffaut, Varda, a city of art, of passion, of ideas. Which Paris would I choose? Which story would I claim? I took a deep breath. The hollow ache in my chest was still there, but it was filled now with something else. Something solid and growing. Resolve? Yes, I said, the word feeling definitive. Yes, I believe I am. We went to Paris. Not as fugitives, not as heartbroken tourists, but as participants. Gabriel came with me. Not as my protector, but as my colleague, my friend. The festival was small and intense, held in a cramped but beautiful old theater in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. The air hummed with creative energy and passionate, slightly frantic discussions about aperture and narrative arc. When my film, now titled Eyes Open, played on the big screen, I thought I might be sick. Seeing my clumsy, heartfelt images projected so large was terrifying. But as it played, a silence fell over the room. It was a different silence from the one in my Rome classroom. This was a silence of absorption. When it ended, the applause was warm, sustained. A critic from a small but respected film journal sought me out afterwards. A very promising first effort, he said in precise English. The composition is exquisite. The POV is clear and compelling. You have a voice, Ms. Jacobs. Keep using it. I didn't win the top prize. A documentary about a Basque fishing village won, deservedly so. But it didn't matter. I had won something far greater, validation, not from a man, but from my craft. A sense of belonging to a world I thought I had lost forever. After the ceremony, Gabriel and I walked along the Seine. The lights of the city glittered on the water. It was beautiful. It had nothing to do with Mark or Chloe. You were magnificent, Gabriel said quietly. I was terrified, I admitted with a laugh. That is how you know it matters, he replied. He stopped walking and turned to face me. The lights from the bridges reflected in his eyes. Sarah, these months, watching you find your strength, it has been an honor. He didn't try to kiss me. He simply took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. His hand was warm and strong, roughened by years of handling cameras and equipment. It felt nothing like Mark's perfectly manicured, smooth grip. It felt real. I looked down at our joined hands, then up at his face. This was not a rebound. This was not a reaction. This was a slow, gentle turning towards a new source of warmth. One that asked nothing of me but to be myself. The honor has been mine, Gabriel, I said, squeezing his hand. Thank you for seeing me. We stood there for a long time. Two middle-aged people with pasts, on the banks of a famous river, quietly, tentatively, stepping into a future. Success, I discovered, was not a lightning bolt, it was a slow sunrise. The festival exposure led to a trickle of interest. A tiny grant here, an invitation to submit to another, slightly larger festival there. A online film platform featured Eyes Open on its curated indie channel. The views were modest, but the comments were encouraging. Gabriel and I returned to Rome, and our relationship settled into a comfortable, creative rhythm. We were partners. We collaborated on small projects, a documentary short about a traditional paper marbler, a series of photographic essays on forgotten Roman courtyards. I wrote, he shot, we argued passionately about edits and then shared a bottle of wine, the disagreements forgotten. It was a partnership of equals, a meeting of minds and passions. The love that grew between us was quiet and deep, built on mutual respect, not need. It felt like coming home to a house I had built myself. I rented a small apartment with a terrace that caught the morning sun. It was mine. My name was on the lease. My things were on the shelves. My scripts were scattered on the desk. The shredded and taped acceptance letter was framed on the wall, not as a monument to a loss, but as a reminder of a reclamation. Meanwhile, the news from home, which I heard in snippets from Linda, grew increasingly grim for Mark. His company, stripped of its major partners and bleeding credibility, was sold for scraps to a competitor. The lavish lifestyle, the house, the cars, the expensive suits vanish, the sycophantic friends, and most pointedly Chloe vanished with it. Linda reported, with a certain grim satisfaction, that Chloe had been seen on the arm of a much older, wealthier man weeks before the company's final collapse. Mark, it seemed, was left with nothing but his bitterness. He tried to reach out to me through every back channel imaginable, pleading emails to old friends, drunken messages to my parents who sternly rebuffed him, even a pathetic letter sent to Linda's address begging her to make me see reason. His messages, which Linda forwarded with a sense of morbid curiosity, spiraled from angry entitlement to abject self-pity. He was a man who had never learned to hold himself accountable. And now that the world was forcing accountability upon him, he was crumbling. I never responded. Engaging would have been a form of energy I refused to spend. He was a chapter I had closed. His suffering brought me no pleasure, but it did bring a final, quiet sense of closure. the universe, in its messy, imperfect way, had balanced the scales. The script I'd started in that internet cafe grew into something substantial. It was a quiet, character-driven piece about a woman in her late 40s who, after the end of a long marriage, retraces a trip she'd planned in her youth but never took. It was about discovery, not romance. It was about finding a sense of self in the architecture of foreign cities and in the quiet corners of your own mind. I called it The Map of Maybe. Gabriel read it in one sitting. When he finished, he looked at me, his eyes shining. "Sarah, this is it. This is your feature. This is the one." "It's too small," I argued, the old insecurities rising. "No one funds stories about women like this." "Then we will fund it ourselves," he said with a determination that brooked no argument. "I have some savings. We can get a small crew. We shoot on digital. We use natural light. We tell the story because it needs to be told," and so we did. It was not glamorous. It was grueling. We maxed out credit cards. We called in every favor Gabriel had accrued in decades of work. Our crew was often just the two of us and a sound tech we paid in pizza and wine. We shot in Rome, in the dusty hills of Tuscany, in a rainy, beautiful Lisbon. I was the director, the writer, the producer, the caterer. I was exhausted and happier than I had ever been in my life. The finished film was rough around the edges, but it was honest. It had a heart. We submitted it to every festival that would have us, expecting nothing. The letter from the Karlovy Vary International Film Festival arrived on a Tuesday. Our film, The Map of Maybe, had been selected for the prestigious Proxima competition. We were going to Czechoslovakia. The festival was a whirlwind. It was bigger, more intense than my small Parisian experience. The Map of Maybe played to a packed house. The silence during the screening was profound, and the applause at the end was not just polite. It was enthusiastic, emotional. We didn't win the main prize, but we won something special, the Fipresi Prize, awarded by the International Critics Jury for a distinctive directorial vision. The review in Variety the next day called it a tender, unflinching, and profoundly moving debut from a major new voice in cinema. Jacobs directs with a wisdom and quiet confidence that belies her first-time feature status, a triumph of character over plot, and of soul over spectacle. Standing at the back of the theater, hearing the translator repeat the critic's words to the crowd, I felt Gabriel's hand find mine. I didn't need a trophy. The words were my prize. The recognition was my validation. Sarah Jacobs, director. It was who I was. The success of The Map of Maybe changed everything. Distribution deals were signed. It had a small theatrical run in art house cinemas across Europe and North America. The reviews were consistently strong. It found its audience. Women, especially women of a certain age who saw their own stories reflected in its quiet journey. They wrote to me. Emails and letters filled with their own stories of starting over. I had given them a mirror, and in return, they gave me a purpose greater than I had ever imagined. One evening, back in Rome, as Gabriel and I were preparing a simple dinner to celebrate a particularly glowing review in The Guardian, my laptop pinged with a new email. The sender's name made me pause. It was from a lawyer representing Mark. My first instinct was to delete it unread, but something, perhaps a need for finality, made me open it. It was not from Mark. It was about him. The lawyer wrote with cold, clinical efficiency. His client, Mark, had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement in a desperate attempt to regain his fortune and status. He had concocted a series of fake real estate investments, swindling former colleagues and desperate investors out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The scheme had unraveled quickly and spectacularly. He was facing a significant prison sentence. Attached was a personal plea, forwarded by the lawyer at his client's insistence. It was a long, rambling, despairing letter from Mark himself. It was filled with self-pity and excuses, blaming his parents for his ambition, blaming Chloe for his distraction, blaming me for his downfall. "If you had just been there, Sarah," he wrote, "none of this would have happened. You were my anchor. I'm lost without you. I'm broken. Please, for the sake of what we had, come see me, forgive me, help me. You're the only one who can." I read it once, then twice. I felt a distant pang of sadness for the broken man he had become, for the wasted life, but that was all. The love, the hate, the anger, it had all been burned away in the fierce, clarifying fire of building my own life. What was left was neither forgiveness nor bitterness. It was indifference. I showed the email to Gabriel. He read it, his expression grim. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. What will you do? I took the laptop from him, moved the cursor over the email, and clicked delete. The message vanished into the digital void. Nothing, I said. My voice calm. I will do absolutely nothing. I closed the laptop. The smell of garlic and rosemary from the kitchen filled the air. Gabriel opened a bottle of good Chianti. We clinked glasses. To doing nothing, he said, a smile in his eyes. To peace, I corrected softly. And that was the end of Mark's story in mine. He became a footnote, a cautionary tale I never told. His fate was his own making, his prison of his own design. My world had expanded far beyond the walls he had tried to build around me. Gabriel and I were married in a small, sun-drenched ceremony, not on a mountaintop, but in the courtyard of the studio where I had taken my first film class. Sophia was my witness. Linda flew in, crying happy tears from the moment she landed. My parents beamed, their faces filled with a relief and pride that told me they had always quietly feared the woman I had been with Mark. I wore a simple, elegant cream-colored suit. I didn't look like a bride. I looked like me. The officiant asked Gabriel if he would love, respect, and honor me. He held my gaze, his voice steady and sure. I will. I will love the woman you are, respect the journey that made you, and honor the dreams you have yet to dream. Then the officiant turned to me. Sarah, do you take this man to be your husband? To love him, to respect him, to honor him, for all the days of your life? I didn't hesitate. The words were there, ready and true. I do. I will love the peace you bring me, respect the partnership we have built, and honor the life we will continue to create, together and as ourselves. We exchanged simple silver bands as we kissed. Our friends, a small, ragtag group of artists, filmmakers, and lifelong companions cheered. It was not a fairy tale ending. It was a real beginning. We honeymooned in a small village on the Amalfi Coast, not for luxury, but for the light and the quiet. We walked, we talked, we read. We made plans for our next project, a documentary about the women who restored ancient manuscripts in a monastery library. It was a shared dream, a collaboration. One rainy afternoon, we took shelter in a tiny, cluttered. The air smelled of old paper and dust. I browsed the shelves, my fingers trailing over cracked spines in a stack of old international news magazines. A familiar face stared out from a buried page in the world news briefs. It was Mark. The photo was a mugshot, grainy and bleak. He looked decades older, his eyes hollow and hopeless. The caption was brief and brutal. Former tech executive sentenced to 8 to 10 years for investment fraud scheme. I stared at it for a long moment. The distance between that man in the photo and the woman I was now felt immeasurable, like looking at a fossil from a prehistoric age. I felt a final, quiet click of a lock deep inside me. Gabriel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. He saw the photo. He didn't say anything. He just held me tighter. You okay? He murmured into my hair. I leaned back into his solid warmth. I'm perfect, I said, and I meant it. I closed the magazine and slid it back into the dark space on the shelf. Let's go. The rain has stopped. We stepped out of the shop. The storm had passed, and the world was washed clean. The sun was breaking through the clouds, painting the wet cobblestones and the pastel buildings in a golden, radiant light. I took Gabriel's hand. We walked back towards our rented room, towards our dinner, towards our life, step by steady step, into the light. That's all for today's story. Thank you for listening. This is When Love Turns into Harm. The tales I share, drawn from life or woven from imagination, are meant to offer you connection, reflection, and perhaps solace or newfound strength. If you long to see your own reflection in others' journeys, or seek a glimmer of light within the maze of emotions, subscribe to When Love Turns into Harm. Listen with your heart. Explore the stories of life.